Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our English Learning podcast. I'm Jennifer, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Elizabeth. How are you doing today, Elizabeth?
Hi, Jennifer. I'm doing well, thank you. Today's topic is a big one, and it's something that could change the future of education as we know it. Should education be privatized entirely? It's a bold idea that would shift the responsibility of education from the government to private entities, and it's something people have very strong opinions about. There are those who believe that privatizing education could improve its quality and efficiency, while others argue that it would lead to inequality and limit access for many students. Today, we're going to dig into the pros and cons of privatizing education and see if we can answer the question of whether it's a good idea.
That's right, Elizabeth. Education is such an important part of our society, and the idea of privatizing it is controversial for a reason. On one hand, privatizing education could lead to more competition and innovation in the education sector, which could improve the quality of schools and benefit students. But on the other hand, there are concerns that full privatization would lead to a lack of equity and create a system where only wealthy families can afford a good education. It's a complex issue, and today, we'll explore both sides of the debate.
Exactly. And for our listeners out there, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Do you think education should be privatized, or do you believe it should remain a public responsibility? Share your opinions with us, and we might even feature them in a future episode. So, Jennifer, let's start by discussing the arguments in favor of privatizing education. Why do some people believe that privatizing education would be a good thing?
Well, Elizabeth, one of the main arguments in favor of privatizing education is that it would introduce more competition into the education system. When schools are privately run, they need to compete for students, and this competition can drive them to improve the quality of education they offer. Proponents of privatization believe that this could lead to better academic outcomes because schools would have to continually innovate and improve in order to attract students and stay in business.
That's such an important point, Jennifer. In a competitive marketplace, schools would have a strong incentive to provide the best possible education to attract families. They might invest in better facilities, hire higher quality teachers, and offer more specialized programs to meet the needs of students. This could lead to higher standards and more innovation in the education sector.
Exactly. Another argument in favor of privatization is that it could lead to greater efficiency. Proponents argue that government-run schools can sometimes be inefficient due to bureaucracy and lack of accountability. By privatizing education, schools would be run more like businesses, with a focus on maximizing resources and reducing waste. This could result in more efficient use of taxpayer dollars or private funding, leading to better outcomes for students.
Yes, Jennifer. The idea is that private schools, being accountable to parents and investors, would be more cost-effective and responsive to the needs of students. They would have to manage their finances carefully and ensure that they're providing value for the money families are paying. In this way, privatization could encourage schools to find innovative ways to deliver high-quality education at a lower cost.
Absolutely. And privatizing education could also lead to more choice for families. In a fully privatized system, parents would have the option to choose from a wide range of schools, each offering different educational approaches and specialties. Whether a family wants a school that focuses on STEM, the arts, or alternative learning methods like Montessori or Waldorf, privatization could give them more freedom to find a school that meets their child's specific needs and interests.
That's such a great point, Jennifer. School choice is often seen as a major benefit of privatization. In a privatized system, parents aren't limited to sending their child to the school in their local district. They can choose a school that aligns with their educational philosophy or their child's learning style. This level of choice could lead to a more personalized education, where students can thrive in environments that suit them best.
Exactly, Elizabeth. And some people argue that privatizing education could lead to better accountability for schools. In a public system, schools may not face the same consequences for poor performance because they're funded by the government regardless of how well they do. In a privatized system, schools would be more accountable to parents, students, and investors, and if they fail to deliver a high-quality education, they could lose students and funding, forcing them to improve or risk going out of business.
That's such an important point, Jennifer. Accountability is key in any system, and privatization could create a situation where schools are more directly accountable to the people they serve. If a school isn't meeting the needs of its students, families would have the option to take their business elsewhere, which could incentivize schools to maintain high standards of teaching and student support.
Absolutely. So, in summary, the main arguments in favor of privatizing education are that it could introduce more competition, increase efficiency, offer more choice for families, and improve accountability. But, of course, not everyone agrees with these ideas. Let's now talk about the arguments against privatizing education. What are some of the concerns that people have about this idea?
Well, Jennifer, one of the biggest concerns about privatizing education is that it could lead to greater inequality. In a fully privatized system, schools would likely charge tuition, and not all families would be able to afford it. This could create a situation where wealthier families have access to high-quality schools, while low-income families are left with fewer options or schools that don't offer the same level of resources and opportunities.
That's such an important point, Elizabeth. Access to education is a fundamental right, and one of the biggest criticisms of privatizing education is that it could make this right dependent on a family's ability to pay. In a privatized system, there's a risk that the gap between wealthy and low-income students could widen, as wealthier families would be able to afford the best schools, while others might be left behind in underfunded institutions.
Exactly, Jennifer. And even if private schools offer scholarships or financial aid to low-income families, there's still the concern that these programs might not be enough to level the playing field. Some families might not qualify for enough financial assistance, and even with scholarships, there could be additional costs like uniforms, books, and extracurricular activities that are still out of reach for many.
Absolutely. And another concern is that privatizing education could lead to profit-driven motives in schools, which might not always align with the best interests of students. When education is seen as a business, there's a risk that schools might prioritize cutting costs or maximizing profits over providing a high-quality education. This could result in underfunded programs, overworked teachers, and a focus on metrics like test scores rather than the holistic development of students.
Yes, Jennifer. Critics argue that when schools are driven by profit, they might make decisions that prioritize financial gain over educational outcomes. For example, schools might cut corners on teacher salaries or reduce spending on special education services in order to save money. This could ultimately harm students, especially those with special needs or those who require additional support.
Exactly, Elizabeth. And speaking of teacher salaries, another concern is that privatizing education could lead to a decline in teacher quality. Private schools, especially for-profit ones, might prioritize keeping costs low by paying teachers less, which could make it harder to attract and retain high-quality educators. Teachers are one of the most important factors in a child's education, and if privatization leads to lower salaries and fewer benefits for teachers, it could negatively impact the quality of education students receive.
That's such a great point, Jennifer. Teachers are the backbone of any education system, and their well-being directly impacts their ability to teach effectively. In a fully privatized system, there's a risk that schools might cut teacher benefits or increase class sizes in order to save money, which could reduce the overall quality of education.
Absolutely. And another major concern is that privatizing education could lead to a lack of oversight. Public schools are accountable to government agencies and must meet certain standards in terms of curriculum, teacher qualifications, and student outcomes. In a privatized system, there's a risk that schools could operate with less oversight, which could lead to inconsistencies in the quality of education across different schools.
Yes, Jennifer. Without strong oversight, there's also the risk of fraud or mismanagement in private schools. In a system where schools are privately funded and run, there may be fewer checks and balances in place to ensure that the money is being used effectively and that students are receiving the education they're promised.
Absolutely. So, the main concerns about privatizing education are that it could lead to greater inequality, profit-driven motives that don't prioritize students, lower teacher quality, and a lack of oversight. But beyond these concerns, there's also the argument that education should be a public good, something that's accessible to everyone, regardless of income or background.
That's such an important point, Jennifer. Many people believe that education is a fundamental right, and that the government has a responsibility to provide free, high-quality education to all children. Privatizing education could undermine this principle by making education a commodity that's bought and sold, rather than a public service that's available to everyone.
Exactly, Elizabeth. Public education is meant to create equal opportunities for all children, regardless of their family's financial situation. By keeping education in the hands of the government, we can ensure that every child has access to the same opportunities, regardless of where they live or how much money their family makes.
Yes, Jennifer. Public education also plays an important role in fostering social cohesion. When children from different backgrounds attend the same schools, they learn to work together, understand each other's perspectives, and develop a sense of community. Privatizing education could lead to greater segregation along socioeconomic lines, with wealthier students attending one set of schools and lower-income students attending another.
That's such a great point, Elizabeth. Schools are not just places where children learn academic subjects. They're also where they learn how to interact with people from different walks of life. A fully privatized system could fragment communities and reduce the diversity of experiences that students are exposed to.
Absolutely, Jennifer. So, to summarize, the arguments against privatizing education include concerns about inequality, profit-driven motives, declining teacher quality, lack of oversight, and the belief that education should remain a public good. It's clear that this is a complex issue with valid points on both sides. Let's now talk about how society should approach the issue of education privatization. Is there a middle ground, or is it an all-or-nothing decision?
That's a great question, Elizabeth. Some people believe that a hybrid model could be the answer, one where both public and private schools coexist and complement each other. In this model, families would have the option to choose private schools if they can afford them, but there would still be a strong public education system in place to ensure that all children have access to quality education.
That's such an interesting idea, Jennifer. A hybrid model could offer families more choice while still maintaining the core principles of public education. In this system, private schools could innovate and experiment with new teaching methods, while public schools provide a safety net for students who may not have the means to attend private institutions.
Exactly. And there are already examples of this kind of hybrid system in many countries, where public schools and private schools coexist. In these systems, there are often voucher programs or tax credits that help low-income families afford private school tuition, ensuring that private education isn't only available to the wealthy.
Yes, Jennifer. A hybrid model could provide a balance between the innovation and choice of privatization and the equity and accessibility of public education. By ensuring that public schools remain strong and well-funded, we can create a system where all students have access to quality education, regardless of whether they attend a public or private school.
Absolutely. And speaking of different perspectives, I think it's a great time to hear from one of our listeners. Let's take a call from someone who might have an interesting perspective on whether education should be privatized entirely. Hi there, you're on the air with Jennifer and Elizabeth. What's your name, and where are you calling from?
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Elizabeth. My name is David, and I'm calling from Seattle, Washington. I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and I love today's topic. I wanted to share my thoughts because I actually attended both public and private schools growing up.
Hi, David. Thank you for calling in. That's so interesting. You've experienced both sides of the debate. Could you tell us a little about your experience with public and private schools?
Sure. I went to a public school for elementary and middle school, and then I attended a private high school. I think both systems have their strengths. In public school, I appreciated the diversity of my classmates and the sense of community. But in private school, I had smaller classes and more personalized attention from teachers. I don't think one system is necessarily better than the other, but I do believe that having options is important.
That's such a valuable perspective, David. It sounds like both public and private schools offered you unique benefits. Do you think education should be fully privatized, or do you believe there should always be a strong public education system?
I think there should always be a strong public education system. Education should be available to everyone, and I think it's important to have a system that ensures equal access to quality education. But I also think private schools have a role to play, especially for families who want a different type of educational experience.
That's such a great insight, David. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
Thanks for having me. I love listening to your podcast, and I'm excited to hear more episodes.
Thanks so much for calling in, David. Take care.
Bye, David.
That was a great call from David. He really highlighted the value of having options in the education system, while also emphasizing the importance of keeping public education strong.
Absolutely, Jennifer. And for those of you listening, if you're enjoying our podcast, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support really helps us keep creating these episodes and sharing more interesting topics with you.
So, where does that leave us in our discussion today? I think it's clear that there are pros and cons to fully privatizing education. On one hand, privatization could lead to more competition, choice, and innovation, but on the other hand, it could also lead to greater inequality, profit-driven motives, and a lack of accountability. Finding a balance between public and private education might be the best way to ensure that all students have access to high-quality education, regardless of their financial situation.
Exactly, Jennifer. Key takeaway is that while privatization might offer some benefits, it's important to protect the principles of public education, ensuring that every child has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background. We hope today's discussion has given you some new insights into this complex issue.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We're always here to share new insights and help you learn English while exploring important topics like this one. Keep listening, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye for now, everyone. And remember, education is the foundation for a strong society. It's important to get it right.